Hello, folks. Hey, how are you? It's Scott Jeffy here. I'm doing another one of my Coffee with Scott sessions with one of my brilliant friends, and I'm so pleased to have her with me. Erin Minsart and I worked together at RNL, and she led our digital marketing efforts there, and she's brilliant. And I have a couple of questions for her today. So, Erin, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. Yes. Well, okay. In the months since I left RNL, I've been able to delve into all kinds of data, and I went and got the NCES IPEDS data by age of the grad market, and I uncovered something astounding. We are not in a millennial slash Gen Z era now at the grad level. We are in a Gen Z slash millennial era. This is the graduate market, folks. Now, this is not the subject of today's session, but I also wanted to share with you the undergrad. Here we have the undergrad, and no surprise anywhere, the undergraduate audience is and has been millennial for quite some time. All of those red shades are indicative of a Gen Z audience. Now, before I should throw some questions at Erin. Here's one thing that makes this so important. Over 25 years, when I've been talking with and working with institutions, I have found that the greatest friction in whether it be talking to marketers, talking to recruiters, talking about program people, is when we reach a point where the most of the leadership of that team is not one but two generations past the primary audience. That's when things just are different enough that there is a difference between what the leaders of the unit think should be done and what the students really expect. So that is our topic today. And Erin has done this far and wide. She led these for dozens and dozens of colleges while we were at RNL. And so, Erin, here's my first question for you. If Gen Z is now the primary target, what are the most important messages in marketing?
This, I think, is the question on everybody's mind as far as marketers right now. And my biggest advice when we're marketing to Gen Z is they're the influencer generation. So they want to see people they know and respect using the products and services first before they make a purchase. So because of that, we have to stay agile as marketers, and we have to stay aware of these trends, ready to pivot when we're marketing to Gen Z. They're a digital first generation, meaning they've grown up online. They know no different. So they've been sorting through messages their whole life, and they've become really savvy at tuning in only to what matters to them. I wish I had that ability. I struggle with that focus, but they can be highly focused and really engaged when it's something that matters to them. So that's really the challenge for us marketers. And when we're messaging any generation, what I like to do is rely on the pain, claim, gain messaging framework. And it's a mouthful, but what it is it makes sure that you're putting yourself in your prospect's shoes. It's not about you as an organization, it's about them. So pain, claim, gain. What is their pain? What is your claim to solve it? And what's the gain, or what's in it for them? And if you think about this generation's influencers, they're doing just that. They're doing videos and they're saying, here's my problem, here's the product and service, and here's the amazing results. So with that said, going back to your first question, I just wanted to kind of set the stage with Gen Z. There's really four areas that I feel are really important when you're marketing to Gen Z. The first is practical outcomes and career advancement. Think about that, what's in it for me? And it's so important to remember that Gen Z is pragmatic and career-oriented. So you want to really focus on how a degree can lead to a specific job title, a specific salary increase, and specific career advancement. Drill down to those specifics because they want to see the specifics. And really emphasize how the skills and knowledge gained are directly applicable to the job market. Again, pragmatic, practical. Make that connection for them so they see it and they can respond to it. And really, it's not that hard. You can do it authentically through alumni stories, through demonstrating employment rates, and salary increases to show that practical value. So again, influencers and practicality. The second area is highlighting social impact. Gen Z values making a positive impact in the world. So show them how your program aligns with their values and they can pursue their passions. So just like demonstrating practical outcomes, demonstrate the purpose and the social impact. Simple ways are emphasizing the potential for social mobility and making an impact in their chosen field. Let them make that, or help them make that connection. And highlight the campus initiatives. What's happening on campus to focus on sustainability, social responsibility, and community engagement? They want to see this. The third, which I think is amazing about Gen Z, is demonstrating support and accessibility. They're the digital generation, but they're the generation of diversity and inclusion. They know no different. So it's just got to be there for them. So highlighting student support services, how are you going to help with their mental health? How are you going to help with their career and their academic services? And something that I think is especially important is making sure your website is ADA compliant for accessibility. So not only is it compliant, but it's also easy to navigate and easy to understand. Remember, they don't want a lot of clutter. They want to get directly to what they need. And finally, I think what maybe is, to me, the most important, because I'm all about messaging, is leading all of your messaging with transparency and authenticity. No sales pitches. You want it to be genuine. And really be open and honest. If there's a weakness about a program, or there's potential challenges or concerns, if it's a very rigorous program, and it is, be honest about it, and really address those challenges that a prospective student might have. And again, going back to not being salesy and authentic, use real student testimonials, and real student images. That's going to help you build that trust and credibility. I think we can all tell what images are stock and what aren't. And I've seen a few instances where universities were using the same stock images to market. So be authentic. Really, I think that's the most important fourth pillar when you're marketing to that generation.
How do these factors differ from the way you marketed to millennials?
Yeah, and there are, some definite similarities between Gen X and millennials. But to me, when you look at millennials, they want to make the world a better place and they view themselves as lifelong learners. Gen Z takes it more personally. They're interested in health, wellness, and technology to be the best version of themselves. So they do want to make the world a better place, but they're still looking at, how do I make myself the best version of myself? So when we're marketing, don't just speak to them, make them feel involved. Don't just sell features. Again, we're not going to be salesy to Gen Z. Remember that pain, claim, gain framework. It's not about your organization. It's about their pain points, or what's in it for them. Again, use that genuine storytelling with diverse perspectives. You want to always be relatable and inclusive. Easy things like using a conversational tone with real voices. That can be hard in academia because we want, we have all the big words, but talk at their level and be real with them. One thing that I've struggled with is embracing imperfections, because I came up in video advertising where it was polished, it was perfect, and you had so many cuts and so many takes. But you don't need that with Gen Z. They're the generation that follows influencers that are in their car or all over the place. So it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be scripted. In fact, they embrace the imperfections. So that's kind of a nice breath.
I hope everybody's embracing ours.
We're all at home. I don't know if you saw earlier, but somebody let my dogs out of my office. So I think it's just, keeping it real. And, speaking of these influencers, leverage influencers and co-creators and, co-created content. And finally, make sure you're highlighting those matters that are important to them, sustainability, diversity, and social responsibility. So it's really kind of the keep it real generation, which it's refreshing in a way, but it's hard as a marketer because it goes against everything we've been told.
It is refreshing. And, one of the things that you and I have talked about before is that when we cross-tabbed all that data from the graduate survey last year, we found that across the generations, so much is the same. They don't have wildly different. But also, we did notice that millennials skew more towards Gen X than Gen Z, which I thought was interesting. But when we think about those generational differerences, it can be kind of interesting to think through those issues. Let me ask you another question, though. So yeah, we're more than half at the grad level Gen Z, but we're still a third millennial, so we can't forget them. So how do you effectively market to both? How do you balance it?
Yeah, and I think, this is a great question, and it can be really tempting to try to combine the messaging because they do share similarities. Generations do, like you said, and now we're looking at kind of that skip generation where Gen X and Gen Z have some because of how they were raised. But the thing that we need to remember is Gen Z wants more personalization than millennials. And if you also think about yourself, like you don't want to be talked to like your parents' generation or the other generation, you hold strong to that. So that personalization is really important. And I think you can sometimes use some broad strokes with some overarching brand campaigns, but without that messaging that's going to immediately grab the attention. They're looking for things that just matter to them. So you have to be really savvy. You can get lost in that digital clutter. What I really love is that generation can filter through all of these messaging based on what's meaningful to them. And to me, I love persona-based messaging. I love conversion funnels. And this is really the opportunity for Gen Z to make those meaningful connections by, taking a step back and really doing your homework with personas. When you look at Gen Z or millennials or even us Gen Xers, it comes down to addressing the pain points again. It's not, I think we overcomplicate it sometimes, all this generational talk. Well, just take a step back and what matters to them? Let's address that. And, how we've been marketing to millennials is great for millennials. How we've been marketing to Gen X is great for Gen X. But Gen Z, they want to enrich that daily life of theirs, and they're focused on the health and well-being, and they're willing to spend on it, yet they're price conscious and practical. So again, that's kind of where that Gen X influence is coming in about being price conscious and practical. But to me, I think the biggest impact when we look at higher ed is they are aware of the previous generation's diminishing returns on degrees. And they're very aware of the better returns on certs, trade schools, and on-the-job training. So really, if you're marketing higher ed to that generation, you have to balance the qualitative and the quantitative benefits and really answer their simple questions. How much am I going to make? What kind of financial help is available? And do I really share the same values as this institution? Is this an organization that I want to engage with and have a relationship with? Because they want relationships with the brands. And I think another thing with Gen Z is respect their experiences, their interests, their goals, and they just want to feel respected for that. Things like flexibility, work autonomy, and independence. They're most impacted by the pandemic, and they're really driving the huge shift in remote work and in flexibility and how we're operating on a day-to-day basis. But really, once you start to build out these personas and their journeys, because you want to understand their journey, where they're going online, how they get from point A to point B, you can build your messaging around those pain points. And what I like to do is a simple marketing funnel. So we've got a consideration, decision, and purchase, an upside down funnel. And draft 5 questions that your persona needs answered at each stage. What's going to naturally help move them through? And that's the foundation of your content plan. Again, I know I'm oversimplifying it, but I think sometimes we overcomplicate things. Answer my questions, help me understand and make a decision. And if you do that properly for each generation, they're just going to move through your funnel and convert.
I love that. You mentioned the pandemic, and I have my own little hypothesis, and that is the pandemic and the questionable economic situation. Some people feel like the economy has been in free fall. I don't, but all of those things combined, I tend to think has taken us all, perhaps all the generations, a little bit towards what is truly the Gen Z point of view, that authenticity. Think of all of us working from home, having people pass behind us in meetings. That's just authentic. Well, I appreciate you doing this on a Friday afternoon, and you have a good weekend. Okay, take care of those dogs.
Yep, it's a great way to end my week, and I always love collaborating with you. So take care.
Thanks. All right.
Thank you.